Hello everybody, this is Albert with the Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to continue the series on how England stole tea from China. Now before we begin, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so these episodes come fresh to you, and also post a comment if you like and come visit us over here at Green Tea House. So I'll definitely put a banner up here for episode 1 where we kind of give the backstory of Robert Fortune, the Scottish gentleman who the East India Company, who essentially owns India and has a monopoly, or had the monopoly on tea for England, how he was picked by the EIC, the East India Company, to go into China. So we'll just continue the story there. If you need the backstory, click on the banner right now. So East India Company, they read his book on his first trip over there, and they're impressed, and they think he's the man for the job. And remember that Fortune is what we would perceive today lower class in England. And so he's scrappy and he's ambitious and he wants to be in a higher caste system. So the botanical experts at the EIC ask him, they commission him to go to China again. But this time the specific purpose is just for tea. The first time he went there, he did bring some tea back. He has a couple chapters in his first book on tea, but he was really there for more just the botanical, the flora, other things, but it wasn't tea specific. So the EIC hires him with a mission, essentially, is bring tea back, actual tea leaves, dry tea leaves, but more importantly, bring tea plants back, bring seeds back, bring utensils, instruments to cultivate the tea, and bring tea masters back, bring Chinamen, as they used to call them, back to India so we can start growing over in the Darjeeling area, which at that point the EIC had seen as maybe an area that could be conducive to growing very good tea. As I mentioned in the previous episode, 1820s, they discovered the Assamica bush and Assam, which is part of British India, but the tea experts in London think it's inferior quality. And this is one of the reasons why the EIC sends Fortune, because at this point, the EIC, having been chartered over 250 years ago, no longer has a monopoly on tea, so they're kind of desperate, and so they need to find a way to make some bank. So Fortune is chosen, he accepts it, he says goodbye to his wife, and he will leave, and he won't see her for about 4 years. So eventually he makes his way to Shanghai, which is a recently opened port. Again, go to episode 1. Beforehand, it was Canton over in the south. That was the only open port for several decades, if not hundreds of years. But because of the Opium War, now England has access to 5 ports, including Shanghai, which at this time was not nearly as big as it is now. So he goes to Shanghai. There are some English traders, wealthy traders that are already established there. So he stays with a certain company over there. And then now his job is to find interpreters, people that know the Chinese inland. Because remember, no white man had been inside the Chinese hinterland really since the Jesuit missionaries of the 1500s. So it's not like he could just go into the hinterland. More often than not, the mandarins or the high-level officials would recognize him and then have him executed because they're not allowed to be there. They're only allowed to be in the ports. So he needs to hire experts that are going to help camouflage him, and then hire experts who know where the tea places are. So from the first season, he is going to go to the Westlake area, kind of what we know of Longjing, Dragonwell, in that area, to get green tea. So he undergoes a transformation, kind of like Robert Downey Jr.'s character in Tropic Thunder. But he has any vestiges of his whiteness really taken away. His hair is cut in a certain way. His hair is cut where he has a queue in the back, which was very customary at the time for Chinamen. And so he really has to disguise himself because he doesn't know any Chinese at the beginning, and he is a good several inches taller than the typical Chinaman. And so at the beginning, it's difficult that he can't talk a lot, so he's got to use his coolies or his servants to kind of negotiate the way. And so he eventually gets to the green tea areas, and here is where he makes one big revelation. Remember, he's note-taking everything, he's gathering everything. Fortune is a meticulous man. And this is when he first notices that they're using gypsum, among other chemicals, to make the green tea look even greener. And so he writes this in his journals, and eventually it's published in England. And we talked about this already in an episode, how this is one of the reasons why England at this point was drinking green tea with milk and sugar, which I think is, we see it as strange. Remember, in China, they weren't drinking it with milk and sugar, but they were drinking it with milk and sugar. And this is one of the reasons why you see English preferences toward tea go from green tea to the more recently, newly discovered black tea, because the Chinese tea masters were using essentially poison to make the green tea leaves look even greener, because they knew from the people at the ports that this is what the West wanted. They just want tea that looks super green. And so they were using these techniques, and Fortune noticed, oh, those are poisons. And so that's one thing he noticed. But eventually he got enough samplings, he and his coolies got enough samplings, got enough seeds. He spends a good season up in that area. He comes back to Shanghai and he ships them in ward cases. So ward cases were a recent innovation, and ward cases are essentially terrariums. We call them terrariums. They're sealed and in glass containers. And so when you put a plant in there, it can survive there for several weeks, if not several months, so long as there's a vacuum, because the plant is making moisture, because it's inhaling it's inhaling carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. The oxygen then condenses on the glass and then in turn provides the oxygen it needs to make carbon dioxide. So it has its own little cycle, so you don't need to water it. It's essentially watering itself. So this was a humongous innovation, the ward cases, not just for the tea plant, but for every plant. Every plant. Remember, China is one of the, I guess you could say, Shangri-Las, for lack of a better word, right? Shangri-Las. For flora. I mean, there's so many plants that were only found in China that eventually the British transported back to the Kew Botanical Gardens over in London. And so the ward cases were invaluable. So he packages a lot of his stuff in ward cases. He packages a lot of the green tea seeds in regular bags with sand, and he ships it to India, to Calcutta, where it's going to go up the Ganges to a experimental station that's going to start planting it there. Now, he has to stay behind in China because his mission was to get green tea and black tea and the utensils and the tea masters. So we'll end this episode by saying that eventually his green tea stuff eventually gets to Calcutta in relatively good condition, but the botanists in Allahabad, where eventually it's transported up to this experimental botanical tea station, kind of ruins everything. He breaks the plants and he messes things up. And so essentially the green tea harvest that Fortune worked over a year to gather and to pack is ruined. And he only finds out about this several months later, because remember, this is all courier, all this is in writing. It's got to go from Shanghai to Calcutta. That takes a long time, Calcutta up into India. And so then they write about what happened, and then they got to send it back to Shanghai where he's at. And so of course he is devastated. And he hears this news after he's already gotten the black tea stuff, which we will talk about in the next episode. So the first season, you could say, of Fortune being over there was pretty much a disaster. But good things that come out of it is he finds out that the green tea is being dyed, and that's not a good thing. And he also finds out that, as we talked about in the first episode, that the belief before this expedition was that green tea and black tea came from different plants. But he definitely confirmed that green tea and black tea both come from Camellia sinensis. And we'll continue this story in the next episode. Guys, post in the comments if you like. Until next time, take care. God bless.